Picture a temple so magnificent that ancient visitors described it as a city of marble. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, dedicated to the goddess of fertility, stood as a pinnacle of art, religion, and architectural sophistication. How did ancient builders achieve such grandeur with enormous marble columns, intricate sculptures, and breathtaking scale? Destroyed by arson, invasions, and looting, only fragments remain. But its legend continues to captivate historians and travelers alike. Join us on History Vault as we explore the mysteries of Artemis's temple, uncovering its design, cultural importance, and the secrets that made it a wonder of the ancient world. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to travel through time, witness lost architecture, and uncover stories history tried to bury. Some wonders vanish, yet their influence lasts forever. They said it was the most beautiful building ever created by human hands. A temple so vast and dazzling that even the gods might have envied it. Yet today, if you walk to the quiet ruins of ancient Ephesus in modern-day Turkey, you'll find almost nothing left of it, just a few lonely columns rising from a marshy field. The echo of greatness lost to time. How could something so magnificent vanish so completely? Who would dare destroy a wonder dedicated to the goddess of the hunt, the protector of women, the bringer of life and death, Artemis herself? The answers lie hidden in a tale woven with ambition, fire, faith, and fate. More than 2,000 years ago, Ephesus wasn't just another city. It was a jewel of the ancient world, a place where marble streets glisten in the sun, and the harbor bustled with merchants from Greece, Persia, Egypt, and beyond. But towering above everything else was the Temple of Artemis. This was no ordinary shrine. It was colossal, stretching 377 feet in length and 180 feet wide, larger than a modern football field, supported by over 100 towering columns, each more than 60 feet high. It seemed less like a building and more like a palace for the divine. The air was thick with incense, the walls decorated with gold, silver, and the finest paintings, and the sound of prayers and chants rolled like waves through its vast halls. But the temple's story began long before the age of marble and gold. Ephesus had worshipped a mother goddess figure for centuries, long before the Greeks arrived. Artemis, as the Greeks called her, was not the soft, moonlit goddess we imagine today. Here, in this part of the world, she was a fierce and powerful deity, a protector of life and a destroyer of enemies. Her cult was so strong that even kings and conquerors dared not disrespect her sanctuary. The earliest version of the temple is believed to have been built around the 8th century BCE, but was a grand rebuild in the 6th century BCE under King Croesus of Lydia. The man so wealthy his name became a proverb that transformed it into one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The architects, Chersiphron and his son Medigenes, faced the challenge of constructing this enormous temple on marshy ground. They feared earthquakes, and so, instead of solid rock, they laid a foundation of layers of charcoal and fleeces to absorb shocks. It was a stroke of genius that kept the temple standing for centuries. Inside, the cult statue of Artemis was unlike the elegant marble depictions seen in other Greek cities. This one was carved wood, blackened with age, and covered with symbols, a strange blend of Greek and Anatolian styles. Her chest bore rows of rounded shapes, which some said were many breasts, symbols of fertility. Others believed they were the testicles of sacrificial bulls, symbols of power and renewal. Every year, pilgrims came from across the known world to leave offerings, seek blessings, and participate in grand festivals that lasted days. But beauty and sanctity alone could not shield the temple from human ambition and madness. In 356 BCE, a man named Herostratus set fire to the Temple of Artemis. His reason? Not hatred, not politics, but the desperate desire to be remembered forever. He believed that by destroying something so great, his name would live on through the ages. The Ephesians were so enraged that they banned the mention of his name under penalty of death. But history, as it often does, betrayed their wish. We still know his name today, and his crime is remembered as one of the most infamous acts of vandalism in history. The irony was cruel. The night the temple burned, far away in Pella, a child was born who would one day change the world, Alexander Great. Ancient writers claimed Artemis was too busy attending his birth to save her own temple from destruction. Yet, the temple's end did not come that night. The people of Ephesus, refusing to let their pride and devotion be erased, began rebuilding it on an even grander scale. When Alexander himself visited the city decades later, he offered to pay for the restoration, but the Ephesians, in a rare moment of defiance, declined. They told him it was not fitting for one god to build a temple for another. Still, his presence and the wealth of the city ensured that the new Temple of Artemis would be even more spectacular than before. For centuries, it stood as a beacon of faith and prosperity. But time is merciless. As new empires rose and old ones crumbled, the worship of Artemis began to fade. By the 3rd century CE, Christianity was spreading to the region, and the temple, once filled with offerings and prayers, grew silent. Eventually, it was sacked by the Goths, stripped of its treasures, and left to decay. Earthquakes and floods did the rest. By the Middle Ages, its stones had been taken to build churches, houses, and even other monuments. The wonder of the ancient world had become a quarry for the living city. Today, only a single reconstructed column stands where the temple once dominated the skyline. Around it, the marshy land swallows the past, and tourists walk in quiet awe, imagining what once was. But the legend of the Temple of Artemis remains, a story of beauty, resilience, and inevitable fall of all human creations, no matter how divine they may seem. As the new Temple of Artemis rose from the ashes, Ephesus transformed into a city of unrivaled wealth and devotion. Every stone of the rebuilt temple gleamed with ambition. Every column stretched skyward as if to touch the heavens themselves. Visitors who arrived at the city were immediately struck by its scale. The temple's vast courtyard, lined with more than 100 Ionic columns, reflected sunlight like a sea of marble and gold. At night, torches illuminated the facade, creating a spectacle so radiant that even the distant sea seemed to shimmer with divine light. Inside, the cult statue of Artemis dominated the hall. Unlike any ordinary sculpture, it combined intricate carvings with symbols of power and fertility, a reminder that Artemis was both protector and life-giver. Every inch of the temple had been designed to inspire awe. The ceilings were adorned with intricate reliefs depicting mythological tales. The walls were decorated with paintings by the finest artists of the age. Even the floors were inlaid with mosaics telling stories of gods, heroes, and battles. It was more than a temple. It was a living encyclopedia of Hellenic devotion and artistic genius. Pilgrims continued to flock from across the Mediterranean, bringing gifts of gold, silver, and rare artifacts. The Ephesians had perfected the art of ceremony. Festivals lasted for days, filled with feasts, dances, and sacred rituals. The air was thick with incense, the scent of oils, and the sound of music. Priests and priestesses moved with practiced grace, leading worshippers in hymns and prayers that echoed to the colonnades. For the faithful, every visit was an encounter with the divine, every offering a chance to be blessed by Artemis herself. The temple also became a hub of economic activity. Merchants set up stalls around the sanctuary, selling fine linens, spices, jewelry, and other luxuries. Travelers spoke of a city so prosperous that its streets were paved with wealth, and its citizens lived under protection of the goddess. For Ephesus, the temple was more than a spiritual center. It was a symbol of civic pride and prosperity. The more magnificent the temple, the greater the city's status in the world. Despite its grandeur, the temple was not immune to human folly. Ambition, envy, and greed constantly threatened its peace. Over the centuries, it was plundered multiple times. Kings and conquerors, drawn by the promise of its wealth, attempted to claim treasures for themselves. Yet the Ephesians remained fiercely protective, rebuilding each time the temple suffered damage. Their devotion was as much an act of defiance as it was a faith. Even philosophers and scholars were captivated by the Temple of Artemis. They wrote treatises on its architecture, debating the ingenuity of its marshy foundations and the beauty of its proportional design. Artists traveled hundreds of miles to sketch its columns, capture its sculptures, and learn the secrets of its artisans. It became a school of inspiration, a place where creativity and devotion merged into a single, awe-inspiring vision. One of the most remarkable aspects of the temple was its adaptability. Unlike many wonders that remained static, the Temple of Artemis evolved. Each reconstruction incorporated new artistic styles, new technologies, and new ideas from across the ancient world. It became a living monument, constantly renewed yet always retaining the essence of its divine inspiration. This adaptability ensured that for centuries, the temple remained not only a wonder of architecture, but also a beacon of cultural resilience. But no matter how magnificent or well-protected, even the greatest monuments are subject to the unstoppable forces of history. Political upheavals, religious shifts, and the inexorable march of time would eventually begin to erode its dominance. The rise of Christianity in Asia Minor brought new beliefs and new priorities. The once vibrant rituals that had filled the temple with life began to fade. Pilgrims dwindled. Ceremonies became rare, and the temple slowly lost its central place in the hearts of the people. By the late centuries of the Roman Empire, the Temple of Artemis faced an uncertain future. The very city that had built it to honor a goddess now questioned its relevance. Yet even as decay set in, stories of its beauty endured. Visitors still came, not always to worship, but to marvel at the splendor of a building that had inspired poets, kings, and ordinary citizens alike. Its fame had transcended its physical presence, becoming a legend told across continents. Even after the final plundering and the eventual collapse of the temple, the legacy of Artemis and her magnificent sanctuary survived. Sculptors, architects, and historians carried the knowledge and inspiration of the temple into new creations. Coins and paintings immortalized its image, preserving its grandeur for generations who would never see the original. The Temple of Artemis had become more than marble and gold. It had become a story, a testament to human ambition, devotion, and the fleeting nature of all worldly wonders. For centuries, the Temple of Artemis has stood as a symbol of divine favor and human ingenuity. Yet even the most magnificent creations are vulnerable to the tides of history. By the 3rd and 4th century CE, the world around Ephesus was changing dramatically. The Roman Empire, once a patron of Greek culture, faced internal instability, invasions, and the rise of new religions. Christianity, now gaining dominance, saw the old temples as relics of a pagan past. The once bustling sanctuary, which had drawn thousands of worshippers, began to see fewer visitors. The chants and prayers that filled its halls with reverence grew silent, replaced by the whispers of uncertainty. Despite these cultural shifts, the Temple of Artemis remained a jewel of architectural and artistic achievement. Its immense columns, soaring into the sky, still inspired awe. Pilgrims who had survived wars and journeys traveled to gaze upon the sacred statue of Artemis, carved with symbols of fertility and divine authority. The mosaic floors and carved reliefs continue to reflect the skill of ancient artisans, capturing the myth and majesty of the goddess in every line. Scholars of the time debated its origins, its design, and the extraordinary vision of the Lydian king and architects who had made it possible. But the peace of the temple could not withstand human ambition or natural forces. Over the centuries, it was plundered repeatedly. Invaders carried off its treasures, gold, silver, and artworks, leaving only the structural bones of the sanctuary behind. And yet, the Ephesians rebuilt each time, driven by devotion, pride, and the desire to honor their goddess. These restorations kept the temple alive long after other great structures had fallen to decay. The ultimate catastrophe, however, would not be gradual. In the 3rd century CE, the Goths swept through Asia Minor, leaving destruction in their wake. Historical accounts suggest that the temple was set ablaze, its treasures looted, and its structure severely damaged. For the people of Ephesus, this was more than an attack on a building. It was an assault on their history, their identity, and the divine presence that had watched over their city for generations. Despite this devastation, the spirit of the temple endured. The Ephesians, resilient as ever, attempted yet another reconstruction. They were determined to preserve the sanctity and grandeur of Artemis's home. This final rebuild, however, could not restore the temple to its former glory. Political instability, economic decline, and the shifting tides of faith made it impossible to maintain such a vast and opulent structure. Gradually, the temple fell into neglect. Its once proud columns began to crumble. The reliefs weathered and eroded, and the sacred statue of Artemis was removed or lost. By the late Roman period, the Temple of Artemis had ceased to function as a religious center. Christianity's rise meant that temples dedicated to pagan gods were abandoned or repurposed. Materials from the temple were taken for new constructions. Marble and stone that had once reflected sunlight in a dazzling display were now scattered across the city for mundane purposes. Earthquakes, common in the region, hastened collapse, toppling columns and cracking foundations. The great sanctuary that once inspired awe now lay in ruins, a shadow of its past grandeur. Yet even in ruin, the Temple of Artemis continued to captivate imaginations. Writers, travelers, and later historians recorded its history, marveling at its scale, its artistry, and the devotion it had inspired. Coins and artistic depictions preserve its image, ensuring that the memory of its magnificence would outlive the physical structure. Legends of the temple's treasures, its architectural brilliance, and even mysterious stories of its destruction became part of the cultural consciousness, passed from one generation to the next. By the time the Middle Ages arrived, only fragments of the temple remained. A few solitary columns, some broken pediments, and scattered artifacts hinted at what once had been. Even these remnants were considered sacred, reminders of a world where human ambition dared to reach for the divine. Archaeologists in later centuries would uncover foundations and fragments, slowly piecing together the story of a building that had dominated its landscape and the imagination of an entire civilization. Today, when one stands amid the ruins of Ephesus, it is hard to imagine the Temple of Artemis in all its glory. Yet in every reconstruction, every coin, and every historical account, the temple lives on. Its story is not merely one of loss, but of resilience, creativity, and the human desire to create something eternal. The Temple of Artemis reminds us that even when all that remains is a single column or a fragment of marble, the legacy of human devotion and artistic achievement can endure for millennia. Centuries passed, and the once majestic Temple of Artemis at Ephesus vanished almost entirely from the landscape. Nature and time had erased its presence from the bustling city that had once thrived around it. For generations, stories of its grandeur existed only in the pages of ancient writers. Pliny the Elder, Strabo, and Pausanias, all of whom had tried to capture the wonder in words. Travelers would arrive in Ephesus expecting to see the magnificent sanctuary, only to find a scattering of broken columns amid marshy fields. The awe-inspiring vision that had drawn kings, pilgrims, and artists alike was gone, leaving behind silence and mystery. Yet the temple's story was far from over. In the 19th century, driven by the passion of archaeology and the lure of history, explorers and scholars set out to uncover the lost wonder. Excavations began amidst the ruins of Ephesus, revealing foundations, column fragments, and sculpted remnants buried beneath layers of earth and debris. Each discovery, no matter how small, was a revelation. Pieces of the temple's elaborate pediments hinted at scenes of mythology, while fragments of Ionic columns revealed the skill and precision of ancient engineers. It was as if the temple itself whispered through the ages, slowly revealing the secrets of its construction and its former glory. Among the most remarkable discoveries were the sculpted reliefs depicting Artemis in her divine splendor. Carvings showed the goddess surrounded by attendants, symbols of fertility, and intricate patterns that had adorned her sanctuary. Scholars noted how the artwork combined Greek and Anatolian influences, reflecting the cultural fusion that had given Ephesus its unique identity. Even in pieces scattered across museums in Europe and Turkey, the spirit of Artemis seemed to endure. The temple story was no longer just in text. It had been resurrected through stone and artistry, giving humanity a tangible connection to the ancient world. The rediscovery of the Temple of Artemis also sparked a broader fascination with the seven wonders of the ancient world. Visitors, historians, and artists began to imagine what the temple might have looked like in its full splendor. Architectural reconstructions, sketches, and even early models were created, allowing people to visualize the soaring columns, the expansive courtyards, and the sacred statue of Artemis herself. Though these were mere interpretations, they captured the imagination of a world eager to connect with its distant past. But the temple's modern legacy is more than academic or artistic. Its story serves as a reflection on the impermanence of human achievement and the enduring power of legend. Generations of travelers who walked among its ruins felt a sense of awe and humility. How could a single city, a single civilization, create something so immense and yet so fleeting? The Temple of Artemis reminds us that even the greatest human creations are vulnerable to time, greed, and neglect. But the memory of beauty and devotion can survive long after the stones have crumbled. Today, The site of Ephesus continues to attract tourists from all over the world. Though only a single column stands in homage to its former glory, visitors close their eyes and imagine the temple as it once was. Marble columns rising high, sunlight glinting off gold and painted reliefs, the cult statue of Artemis dominating the vast hall. Archaeologists' findings, displayed in local museums, allow us to connect physically with fragments of the past, while digital reconstructions bring the wonder back to life on screens. In this way, the Temple of Artemis transcends its physical absence, existing in memory, scholarship, and imagination alike. Even beyond the realm of academia, the temple has inspired countless works of literature, art, and storytelling. Poets have written verses celebrating its lost grandeur. Novelists have imagined its corridors filled with worshippers. Filmmakers have recreated its majesty for modern audiences. Artemis herself, as the guardian of life, fertility, and protection, continues to capture imaginations, her sanctuary symbolizing both human devotion and human ambition. Through its rediscovery and study, the Temple of Artemis teaches profound lessons about culture, resilience, and impermanence of worldly achievements. It challenges us to consider the legacies we leave behind, not merely in stone or gold, but in stories, influence, and inspiration. And in this, Artemis remains alive, not in her temple, but in every mind touched by her enduring myth, every scholar who pieces together her history, and every visitor who imagines the towering wonder that once graced Ephesus. As the centuries rolled on, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus became more than a physical structure. It transformed into a symbol, a story whispered across time. Though its marble and gold no longer rose skyward, the temple's essence endured in collective imagination of humanity. Artists, scholars, and travelers, long after the last stone had crumbled, continue to marvel at the wonder that had once dominated Ephesus. Its influence transcended borders and eras, shaping perceptions of what is possible when human ambition meets devotion and artistry. The temple's enduring power lies not only in its architectural brilliance, but in the culture it fostered. For generations, it was a hub of worship, commerce, and learning. Pilgrims from far lands came to witness Artemis in all her divine majesty, leaving offerings and participating in rituals that united communities. Merchants and artisans thrived around its grounds, spreading ideas, techniques, and goods across the Mediterranean. The temple was a living, breathing center of civilization, reflecting the values and aspirations of a people who believed in creating beauty worthy of the gods. Yet, the story of Artemis is also a cautionary tale. The temple's repeated destruction by fire, by invaders, and finally by neglect reminds us that even the most magnificent achievements are fragile. The grandest columns, the most intricate carvings, the divine statue itself, all succumb to time, natural disaster, and human folly. There's a profound lesson in this. Nothing built solely in the material world can endure forever. What survives, instead, is the impact on minds and hearts. The stories pass from one generation to the next, and the inspiration to continue creating. Artemis, as a goddess, embodies this duality. She is both life-giver and protector, fierce yet nurturing. Her temple, though physically lost, continues to teach us about balance, between ambition and humility, between creation and impermanence. In a world obsessed with permanence, the story of the Temple of Artemis reminds us that legacy is not measured in stone or gold, but in the enduring influence of ideas, culture, and devotion. Modern archaeology and digital reconstructions have allowed us to glimpse what it might have been. Scholars painstakingly study column bases, sculptural fragments, and ancient texts to recreate the temple in drawings, 3D models, and even virtual reality experiences. These reconstructions, while imperfect, bring us closer to understanding the scale and beauty that awed ancient visitors. They allow us to walk, in imagination if not in reality, among the vast colonnades, to see the sunlight glint off gold ornaments, to sense the weight and presence of Artemis herself. Even more than its architecture, the temple's legend teaches resilience. The people of Ephesus rebuilt it multiple times, each restoration a statement of human determination and reverence. They refused to let a single act of destruction erase their culture or devotion. This persistence is a form of immortality, proving that the essence of civilization, the values, beliefs, and collective memory, can survive long after physical monuments are gone. In contemporary culture, the Temple of Artemis continues to inspire. Its story appears in history books, documentaries, novels, and films. It serves as a benchmark against which the grandeur of other monuments is measured. Artists draw inspiration from its scale and symbolism. Architects study its design principles to solve modern engineering challenges. The temple's spirit, therefore, lives on, not as stone or marble, but as an idea, a blueprint for human creativity, and a reminder of what devotion and imagination can achieve. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Temple of Artemis is its ability to connect past and present. Standing on its ruins today, one can almost hear the echoes of chanting worshippers, the distant hum of a bustling marketplace, the footsteps of pilgrims traveling from distant lands. This temple bridge allows us to feel, if only fleetingly, the heartbeat of an ancient world. It teaches us that while empires rise and fall, and while even wonders may vanish, the memory of beauty and human aspiration can survive millennia. Ultimately, the Temple of Artemis is a testament to human ambition, creativity, and devotion. It challenges us to dream, to build, and to create works of meaning, knowing that physical permanence is fleeting. Yet, through story, memory, and inspiration, greatness endures. From the bustling streets of Ephesus to the imaginations of modern audiences, Artemis's temple remains eternal, not as a building, but as a symbol of what humanity can achieve when it dares to reach for the divine. As we leave the solitary column standing amidst the ruins, we are reminded that even in absence, greatness speaks. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus teaches us that while the world may change and time may claim all physical forms, the essence of vision, devotion, and beauty is indestructible. It is a lesson written not in marble alone, but in the hearts of all who remember, reconstruct, and dream. The Temple of Artemis may be in ruins, but its grandeur echoes through history. It symbolizes the ingenuity, devotion, and ambition of an ancient civilization, inspiring art, architecture, and imagination for millennia. If the story of Artemis's temple fascinates you, subscribe to History Vault and hit the bell icon. Explore lost civilizations' hidden secrets and the marvels that shaped the ancient world. Even in fragments, the temple's legacy continues to inspire curiosity and awe.